Well, again, everybody, welcome back to this session that was postponed from yesterday due to some technical difficulties. And I'm thrilled to be able to say that all of the speakers who were to be with me yesterday have made themselves available today. So I want to thank them very much for that. And I also want to thank you for your forbearance and being able to join us again for this important session. Yesterday when I started, and I think I got most of what I said before everything started to go terribly wrong, I think it is important for everyone as we get into this discussion to recognize that the Centre for Sports and Human Rights and the MSE platform that preceded it has done a lot of work over the years with regards to the impact of mega sports events and human rights. And those documents, along with a range of other issues, can be found in a very extensive library part of the website of the Centre for Sports and Human Rights. And so I would really encourage all of you to make use of that resource, because it's not only material that is important for the large events which we're talking about, but they're also very helpful to any group or organization or indeed athlete that is looking to understand some of the human rights challenges associated with and arising from sport. But for today's discussion, there's a couple I want to point out in particular. One is called Game Time, Planning and Acting to Respect Human Rights in Mega Sports Events. And the second is the MSE Life Cycle, Embedding Human Rights from Vision to Legacy. And I think both of those documents set out very clearly the approach that the Centre and many others are now taking with regards to mega sports events, that they are not just an event. It just doesn't occur and go away. There's a lot that goes into the planning, the vision, preparation, the construction, the hosting, and then the legacy issues that arise from these events. And I think we'll go through today and hear from a number of speakers who are dealing and struggling at times with some of the issues and challenges that these events bring to people. And I'm going to start now, Philip, if I may, and switch to you, Philip Trattner. Philip Trattner is the Director General for Sport in the there's a New Zealander getting confused, in the Austrian Ministry of Sport. And he's going to talk to us a bit about a publication that they've undertaken to provide protection and respect for human rights at international sports events in Austria. So if I can pass over to you now for your comments, Philip, from Austria, not Australia, that'd be much appreciated.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me today?
Indeed.
Okay. So I'm the General Director of the Sports Ministry in Austria. My minister is very in this issue, but today he's not available because there are a lot of work in the Austrian government. So I came from the sport of basketball, for what Austria is not so famous, but I worked also for the ski federation, probably that sport is Austria is famous for. But let's go back to basketball. So we knew that human rights, and especially in the United States, in the sport of basketball starts with the very famous games, Kentucky against the Texas Tech University, where the mindset of the basketball organization in America changed. Because in this game, in this probably most famous game, the head coach of the Texas played only with his 8 Afro-American players to make a sign that Afro-American people are in the society, in the university. And now it's taking during some times, but let's see, some years ago, the NFL players were kneeling on their knees during the national anthem, and they show a little bit of protest against the politicians, and also the mindset of racism, of homophobic issues in the United States. And now this year, I think if there was any need for proof the human rights are becoming an increasingly important issue of major sport events, the Soccer European Championship was organized this year in Europe, in a lot of countries. And in the middle of the title, title fights. Homophobic laws were passed in Hungary, where some of the football matches of the European Championships were hosted. And the protest against the act started immediately. So this became a high-profile issue, not only on the streets, but also in the stands and on the field. And probably everybody can remember that the German goalkeeper and the captain of the team was the first player to wear a rainbow armband as a sign of the protest. And everybody, I think, remember also that the stadium in Munich was shining in the rainbow flag. So even the venue in Munich. And this was signed prohibited by the UEFA. And what the UEFA had obviously not expected, however, was the social breed, and the protest was now reached. Numerous of sponsors has integrated rainbow colors in the subjects, and probably everybody sees now also on their Facebooks when the profile photos has a rainbow sign. Probably not yesterday, because yesterday in Austria Facebook and Instagram was not available during the evening, but I think around 1 o'clock in the morning it starts again. And there we see that all the society, all the sports family, and also during the Olympic Games in Tokyo, and all the medalists and the Olympic champions give a big solidarity to Afro-American people, to people who were discriminated about homophobic items. And another strong sign of the European Championship was the entry teams were kneeling down before the start of the game as a protest against racial motivated discrimination against minorities. And from a global perspective, the goal must be that we do not have to talk about human rights defected in major events in 10 years' time, but about the contribution these sports events have made to positive development. I'm aware that we still have a lot of work to do. So the work is not over after this European Championship. So it's a protest, and to bring it in the mindset, especially in the next generation, that normally there should no discussions about should we have to protect somebody? Should we have to make signs? It should be noble, and that's also our work for the politicians in the ministries, in the governments, in the small cities, in the big cities, in Big Apple, also in Sydney, and also for the next Olympic Games in Paris, to develop these programs. And we have to protect our athletes, our sport athletes, and to give them a strong shoulder also to probably to get the outcome or something else. So the discussions of human rights issues are already present in many large sports associations, not least because the media have also increasingly take up the topic. However, human rights are not part of this core or day-to-day business of these sports organizations. That is why it was of importance to me to offer support to the sports organizations in Austria. As the ministry responsible for sport, we believe that our sport and human rights handbook provides a good base for providing sports associations wide guidelines on human rights issues. So that what we do, we give them an handbook, and to make it a little bit sensibility, our organizations, what is the first step to a discrimination? What is the first step to bring some discrimination in our associations? And in Austria, we have to see in some sports, when you see the national team is coming to the stadium or to the gym, and you see the names on their back. Our national teams are a lot of families of migration, second migration, first migration from Yugoslavia, but also now from other countries. And this is the back of our national teams. And when you see also the kids they are working together. And I think that in this handbook, international sport events and human rights can make an important contribution in two ways to promote, to enforce of human rights. On the one hand, Austria regularly hosts most sports events and must make sure that human rights are ensured when those events are held. So you see, last year we have the European Championship in beach volleyball. We have every year very big major events in winter sport, in skiing and ski jumping and something else. So I think that's what Austria is famous for. That's our sports ID to host sport events. And the politicians are usually confronted with legitimate and critical questions about major events. Yet big points, sports associations make their awards decisions. Politicals cannot and should not have an influence of this. However, human rights aspects will only be given greater attention in the system if the associations themselves pay attention to them in their decisions. So this is exactly where the handbook starts. The Austrian associations have the right to vote in awarded decisions. The influence of a small country alone is limited, but the European Union cares a significant weight which may not be used adequately in the past. If the award has already taken place, the most important instrument of enforcing human rights are already been surrendered. This handbook is also a guideline for associations which questions should be asked and answered in advance during the awarding process. In attention to the handbook, regular meeting of the working group on sports and human rights are an important forum for the association human rights officers. In Austria, specific topics are dealt with the deep in these meetings. Most recently, the topic of child protections. Nevertheless, we also value enough space for the exchange between the associations so the experiences and best practices examples can be shared. Based on our experience, I can only recommend both the handbook and the regular exchange of human rights issue in sports. So we start in Austria now the work with the handbook to bring it to our associations and also as a guideline to bring some sport major events to Austria. And you will see it also in the next years. We will have a lot of big major events, not also in the famous sports, but also in some trend sports and youth sports. So I say thank you to send you these words to your discussions. I'm a little bit sorry about that, but today I'm a little bit in a hurry. It's only a small gap, but I say thank you and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much indeed. If you've got time for just one question, how is Austria looking to take this handbook outside of Austria? You're saying you're going to host a number of sport events. Some of those will be organized by entities outside of Austria. So are you looking to share this document with these global or leading sports organizations and other countries around Austria?
Yeah, so the one side is that our associations are in a regular contact with the international associations. They have a lot of meetings and they are in a big discussion. That's the one side. And on the other side, you know, when major events will be held in Austria, the associations come to us to get some money. So that's normal. And it's not only in the item of human sports, or in the item of green events. So we made some regulations we made it as a fixed standard in our contracts with the association. So when they get some money, we have to make sure that these points are in this contract. And the next time is that we start with this translation, this handbook into English. So, and when it's English, then it's going out. So it's a little bit easier.
That's fantastic. And I can tell you now, there'll be a lot of people on this Zoom call who will be very interested to see that document when it becomes available. So thank you very much indeed, Philip, for sitting in and doing this for us. And I appreciate time is of the essence for you. So like any good government official, I'll let you get on and do your work. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Well, now to pivot a little bit, and we're going to go to Nobuyuki Sugimoto-san, who is the Director for Sustainability Planning for the Tokyo Organizing Committee of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, which everyone will know has just been held in Tokyo. And I think it's fair to say, Nobuyuki, that what you thought you were going to host and what you ended up hosting may have been slightly different things. So we're very interested to understand how the actual TOCOG took the changes in their stride and the steps that they took around human rights in order to prevail even in a very changed circumstance. So Nobuyuki-san, the floor is yours.
Brent-san, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And hello, everybody, my friend audiences. So it is my great pleasure to share our experiences and lessons at the Tokyo 2020 Games. So as you may know very well, the Tokyo 2020 Games was a quite unique games, the first postponed games in the Olympic and the Paralympic history, after the lives of people all over the world have been dramatically altered by the COVID-19 pandemic. So our highest priority was a safe and secure games, and we took a safety-first approach to our preparations and delivery. We introduced strict rules and eventually staged the games with almost no spectators. And these unexpected changes required us big operational changes and challenges, even in our human rights and diversity and inclusion games operations. Anyway, we have overcome them and staged the games. So later, I'd like to explain two significant examples of challenges we experienced. But at the beginning of my talk, I'd like to share the most important learning, what I want to share with you today. That is, importance of collaborative approach through engagement with various stakeholders and open and inclusive management. Without these, we could not deliver the games, actually. So first example, as for objectives of the games on human rights theme, real understanding of respect of human rights and diversity inclusion through the games experience is very crucial for more than 100,000 game staff, means TOCOG staff, volunteers, and contractors, as well as spectators. Particularly, we believe the game staff is very important because we expect them after the games, after leaving the TOCOG or the Tokyo 20 Games, we expect them to lead and contribute or towards creating inclusive society in the real world, in the society, not in the games. So we were committed to holding the games in a way that all people can enjoy without experiencing issues such as discrimination or harassment. We tried to showcase such real experiences at the games. So we prepared integrated and practical guidelines to promote diversity and inclusion games, thanks to various stakeholders' support, and rolled out education and training to staff. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't have enough time to explain the details of the guideline. But anyway, we have a plan of disclosing and sharing essential elements of the guidelines for future public use. So after this session, I want to discuss with center staff for that next step. And back to the story. Honestly speaking, in the course of preparation, TOCOG didn't have enough expertise on human rights operation at mega sports events. So all the help from such stakeholders and experts who share the same objective with us, that is, success of Tokyo 2020 Games human rights efforts, will definitely contribute to progress of human rights in society at large. So that all that help enable this. So due to delivering the games without spectators, actually we could not verify the effectiveness of our preparations, but our staff showed omotenashi hospitality spirit to athletes and media, I believe. So next, another example is relating to athletes' activism. Sorry. Again, TOCOG had not had to owe such stakeholders support and help. So as you know very well, IOC has been strictly against any form of propaganda or political statements made during the games on the basis of the Rule 50 of the Olympic Charter. But in the society, in the last couple of years, athletes across sports have been using their power to make political statements on the field, at the same time sending out a social message concerning the world at large, such as the BLM movement. Then, following the debates and the recommendations developed by the IOC Athletes Commission, the Rule 50.2 guidelines for the Tokyo 2020 Games was introduced. On the last timing, we were just about staging the games. Naturally, we TOCOG had to adapt swiftly our games operation procedures and provide our games staff those of related FAs on the ground with necessary additional explanation and training. Eventually, during the Tokyo 20 Games, we observed many athletes and officials express their opinion opposing discrimination, such as kneeling demonstration at the women's soccer. And in the result, we TOCOG did not experience any operational troubles at all. So again, I appreciate all the help and support by our friends. So as a conclusion, I say again, so collaborative approach through engagement with various stakeholders and open and inclusive management of the mega sporting events is very, very important. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Nobuyuki-san. That's very interesting. I think the experience of Tokyo will be something that many sports will now turn to see how not only you coped in a time of pandemic, but actually how you took forward this issue around transparency as management, inclusiveness of stakeholders as you went through the preparation and the hosting of the games. I think also the work that was done around diversity and inclusion, how you allowed effect to be given to freedom of expression, and then even more importantly, your willingness to share the work that you did as a public good for others to benefit from. So I think, you know, as people are listening on this call, and I'm sure that the Commonwealth Games looking forward to 2022 will be very keenly looking at your experiences. So thank you very much for that. That's a very, very helpful contribution. Appreciate it very much. Right, we're now going to pivot to 2022. So we're going to go looking forward rather than at the past and see how it's going to be for Birmingham Commonwealth Games in 2022. And I'm very pleased to say that we have two people from the Birmingham Organising Committee with us today. We have Donna Fraser, who's the Head of Inclusion and Engagement at the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee, and Burak Kaplanoglu, who is the head of executive office for the Birmingham Organising Committee. So thank you both. And if I can turn perhaps first to, who'd like to go first? Donna or Burak? Who'd like to go first? This is a democracy.
Barak is going to pass the baton to me, so Barak will be first.
All right, then Barak, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you for previous speakers for some really valuable points that were made. One of the key questions we do get asked from time to time is that, why are these games different? Human rights is fundamental to realizing Birmingham 2022's vision to be a games for everyone. And let me put that in the context of why we are different in terms of our planning, our implementation, and our efforts. To start with, Commonwealth Games represent the modern Commonwealth. We do acknowledge the point that was made before: sports is changing, society is in changes, as well as the games are changing with that. So I think it's a very important point to make in terms of both Commonwealth Games as well as sports as a movement. Federation's values of humanity, equality, destiny, they come to life at the games, which is typically known as the friendly games. For those friends and colleagues who don't know that much about the games, in 2022, we'll be hosting 72 nations, 4,500 athletes, 19 sports, represented across the Commonwealth and across a diverse global audience of 1.5 billion people. So we do have a serious responsibility associated with that. We do also know that maybe some of us, it's an important point, is that we have a fully integrated para sports program, and that's been going on for a number of games. And for the first time, this will be the first games ever to have more medals for women than men. So that is the kind of the Commonwealth movement and sports angle. But then there is also a very important local angle, as there is in these games. Birmingham as a city, it's the second biggest city in the UK, the youngest population in Europe. It actually is made up of very diverse communities. And as you said, you know, Tokyo has done a brilliant job in terms of delivering a safe and secure games. We are part of that post-pandemic recovery where leveling up the inequalities between the regions in the UK is a top government priority. Therefore, in that context, it was actually relatively straightforward for us to align CGF and our partners and the city around this vision for a games for everyone. But what does that look like in practice? Because it's easier said than done. We have done a number of things that is different. For example, the human rights is led by the executive office. So our CEO is responsible and he's supported by myself and our head of inclusion, Donna. Another piece that's really important. Recently, you've all seen it, environmental aspects of the agenda is very, very, prominent. But we put equal weight to social economic development as well as environmental development. Another difference that I think we can proudly share with you is that we have taken a very integrated partnership approach. What does that mean? CGF has a human rights strategy, which provides us the requirements. We have an OC human rights strategy, which is quite comprehensive. And then that is back to back with our cross-partner legacy plan. So the requirements from CGF feed into our plan, and then that connects really nicely across the partnership for post-games legacy, which you mentioned, Brent, is a key fundamental element for any future games, as well as today now. Part of our program is a comprehensive program. So we have 16 actions. We have a rubber hits the road. And we have taken an approach that not only looking at risks, it's just as important when in terms of human rights to look at opportunities as well. Looking at opportunities, I can share with you what we have done differently is that we have actually put resources in places that didn't exist before. So we have a head of inclusion for the first time. We actually have a safeguarding lead for the first time, working closely with CGF, and we have an ethical trading manager. So it's very important for an organizing committee to invest in these functions in terms of, putting into action what you preach or what you pledge for. Last but not least, as you mentioned before, Brent, there will be challenges. We know this is a large, complex, dynamic topic. We will be learning from Tokyo, we'll be learning from other events, and it's really important for us to learn from the past and the present, provide a level of what we call humble leadership in this field so that we can actually pass it on to the future games. Because I really genuinely think, as it was mentioned before, it's important, the real difference will be our ability to share our lessons learned. Another piece that people ask us from time to time, they ask us about requirements. How do we come up with the requirements? Because as you said, it's a very complex, dynamic topic. In order to identify a series of requirements, what we have done is that we looked at, we followed the robust process. We looked at UN guiding principles, looked at impact groups, to look at salient risks. Nobuyuki-san has mentioned about tapping into expertise. We were lucky enough through CGF to have access to really good, well-known experts in this field to kind of guide us through this. And I think any organizer should kind of also tap into some international well-known expertise in order to make that happen. Because we're at the planning phase, I will give you some examples of requirements. First one, which I think fundamental for any games, is that integrating human rights into OC policy. We have a commitment statement, don't get us wrong, but we actually should make the decision to integrate human rights into every policy that we have. Rather than have a separate policy that stands on the side, we think it's fundamentally important that it's fully integrated. We've implemented things like equality impact assessment, which Donna will expand on shortly. We've also taken a systematic approach. Many events today get ISO 20121 standard accreditation, but it's fundamental that we do want to do things differently. Therefore, we're planning to do a pilot for the Human Rights and Child Rights Annex. And then in terms of our policies, we've gone beyond our staff because it's a lot easier for most organizations to focus on their staff, but you do need to expand your scope wider than that, including our supply chain. So part of that, what we have done is implementing a sourcing code, a sustainable sourcing code, which sets up minimum standards and including, self-declarations, right to audit, quite a robust system. We actually have started an ongoing evaluation and checking compliance program. So we are actually looking into our supply chain very closely. So we do take it beyond just modern slavery statements. It's very important for us to live what we preach and what we share with others. And I think Donna will share with you more about what we are doing in terms of safeguarding. I do want to reference to Nobuyuki-san's comments about us being not alone. We're actually working with the likes of UNICEF, Birmingham Children's Trust, and City Council with regards to safeguarding. And there is so much knowledge, richness within other stakeholders that you can tap into as an organization. And I do really would like to encourage everybody to tap into that kind of as an opportunity. But last but not least, that was the point made in terms of Tokyo, in terms of sports. We had to clarify freedom of speech in and around the games. And we had to be really honest with that. What does that mean for us? As OC, we're committed to neutral and balanced, being a neutral and balanced platform for respectful protest. In terms of around the games, we're lucky enough that freedom of speech is enshrined in the UK law, although there are a number of challenges, as we know, everywhere in the world with regards to that. But our security team and police are very experienced in terms of facilitating peaceful protest. And we do believe in close cooperation with the authorities as well as the groups in order to facilitate for us to be that neutral, balanced platform. In terms of in the games, I think Donna will expand on the point about ASLI's advocacy planning that we have been doing with very close collaboration with CGF, as well as our inclusion program. One last point that I would like to make, which we think is really, really important. We can only be inclusive games if we are an inclusive organization. It starts with us. Therefore, we have seen a number of actions we've taken. We see that as an opportunity to really truly transform our organization, which can then lead into future legacy. Having said that, let me pass on the baton to my colleague, Donna.
Just if I can interfere, Donna, could you bear with me just a minute? I just have a couple of questions I'd like to get through now. We have a chat function, everybody. We are receiving questions online, so please don't hesitate. But one that really is for both you, Barak, but also Nobuyuki-san, is how do we go about making the best means of transfer of learnings to following games? How does Tokyo give it to Paris, Paris to Los Angeles? How does the Commonwealth Games pass this work on and also receive guidance from earlier games? And is there something that the centre could do to help facilitate that transfer? Or is this something which you see as being almost automatic now through this process of learnings that we're seeing developed? So either you, Barak, or Nobuyuki-san, if you have any thoughts on that? Or I could sing.
Nobuyuki-san, would you like to go first?
You're on mute, Nobuyuki-san.
Sorry very much. Sorry. Actually, it's a very difficult question to answer. It's just my opinion. So we prepare official sustainability post-games report, which include all the, not all, details and important material issues relating to the human rights efforts and legacy succession to future games. But that is just a written document. So I personally believe we cannot convey the actual sense or message just on the written document. So I believe this kind of direct communication, mutual discussion or dialogue is much more effective, I believe.
That's certainly something, perhaps, for those from the centre listening, is something they could accommodate. Barak, do you have anything to say on that in terms of the sharing and the learnings and how best to do it?
I think it's a combination of, as Nobuyuki-san has mentioned, it's a combination of actions. We have MOUs with a number of major events. And I think I agree with Nobuyuki-san that nothing replaces the human-to-human interaction in terms of going beyond documentation. So I think perhaps, as you said, Brandy said something for the center to kind of help us facilitate moving forward. We will welcome that. But anybody on this call would like to connect myself or Donna with regards to having any questions, you will really find us waiting with open arms to be able to share with you anything that we have actually learned.
Thank you very much, Barak. And now, Donna, be clear, I'm not going to share your private cell phone number with anyone on this call. I'm sure that they can contact you through the Birmingham 2022 website. But now let me give the floor to you, Donna.
Thank you so much, Brent, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are listening in. Absolutely, more than happy to connect. I think this is absolutely key. We are a sport across the world, and we want to share that knowledge as much as possible. And you can find me on LinkedIn if you don't want to share my number. So from my perspective, we have a clear vision, and as Barak mentioned earlier, to deliver an inclusive and accessible games for everyone. And as a former athlete myself, been to many major competitions, I know how important inclusivity is for athletes, spectators, officials, and volunteers. And also, as Barak alluded to, we at the OC took positive action to appoint not only my role, but our safeguarding lead role, which is a first. That just goes to show that this piece of work is absolutely integral to part of our delivery as a Games, focusing on the welfare of our athletes, spectators, officials, etc., all those key stakeholders, and that is a huge priority for ourselves. We have a number of strategic priorities within the OC, which across the piece, we live and breathe these priorities: education, sustainability, diverse workforce, accessibility and inclusivity, culture and community. And I'm just going to focus on one particular, and that's education. Educating and developing our shared understanding on issues on inequality is key, especially for this forum. In order for me to achieve this, we have a number of initiatives being rolled out both internally and externally. But a big piece of work for me was to develop an EDI framework for all of our functional areas within the OC to adopt. And this is absolutely key. This is spread into 4 key areas: equality, diversity, inclusion, and legacy. Just to break that down a little bit around equality. Equality impact assessments, which was mentioned previously, these are usually adopted with all policies, but for me, this is everything, all our guidance, our decision-making processes, and that has been fully adopted through our operational plans. Within that encompasses human rights issues to be addressed and be flagged much earlier than them happening on the day or during the Games. So we're trying to be as proactive as we possibly can, and that's lessons learned, similar to what's happened in Tokyo and previous Games, and that's been documented. Diversity covers off workforce diversity, and that's around diversity. We want to really engage with our region, West Midlands and Birmingham, bring people in to be part of the games. And likewise, the recruitment of those individuals to ensure that we have a complete diverse forum and panel when we're going through that interview process. So that reach is far and wide. And then finally, around supplier diversity, again, that reach, are we really tackling those communities and suppliers that are diverse and not just always using the same organisations we would use for previous games? Inclusion is a difficult one to measure. However, we're looking at behaviours, that inclusive behaviours, the language that we use, potentially in terms of when we're recruiting, our job descriptions, how we are as an organisation. That's that culture piece. And part and parcel of that is around the equality impact assessment. And for those on this forum who do not know what an equality impact assessment is, it's a very basic tool. It's almost like a check and challenge list. So if there's any decision, guidance, policy, you will go through that checklist to see if that decision is impacting any of the protected characteristics. Of course, they differ across the world, but for us in the UK, we have 9 protected characteristics. So is that discriminative against any of those? And if it is, then we need to review that policy, guidance, or decision. And then finally, that final piece within the EDI framework is legacy. What positive legacy do we want to leave behind as a games once they're over? And that's something all of our functional areas need to take on board in everything that they're doing. In terms of education as well, we have a complete educational internal programme across the OC, and only last week delivered National Inclusion Week, where we engaged with external organisations within the region, and again, just showcasing the work that the functional areas are doing, sharing that knowledge, raising the awareness on any particular topic. Moving forward for safeguarding, he will be doing a number of series of introductions around safeguarding. So not scaremongering anyone whatsoever. It's a nice way of drip feeding that information. And likewise, he will be working with some of the functional areas with the chef de missions, for example, not when the games start, but prior to that. So again, just engaging with those key stakeholders. Community engagement is absolutely key in all of this. And for me, it's a collaborative approach. And so many of the previous speakers have said, we don't always have the answers. So it's absolutely imperative that we work and engage with other bodies who do have those expertise. So for us, we're working with Commonwealth Games Federation, UNICEF and DCMS, who absolutely have those expertise in human rights. Inclusion is an operative word, and as we as an OC, we're saying it's the games for everyone. There is an opportunity here for us to proactively educate, raise awareness of human rights within sport. We are having ongoing discussions as part of the athlete advocacy, working with Brendan Williams, who's the chair of that group, and he'll be speaking later on today around the freedom of speech. So if you are going to join, I'm sure that'll be a fantastic session. Now, we all know mental health, especially during Tokyo with some of the situations with some of the athletes coming out and talking about their mental health is a huge part of our work. So for me, I'm working internally with our medical team to look at the provision for our athletes, spectators, staff as well, because we often forget about our staff and their welfare and what provision can be put in place throughout the games. And that's really important. For our staff within the OC, we have our mental health first aiders. We've got a huge program around well-being because, of course, leading up to any major competition, the stress levels will rise. So we're really trying to be ahead of the game and make sure that everyone can feel open and that support is in place. We're also working closely with our communications team and working on several campaigns behind the scene, which I cannot share at this stage, with a huge focus aligned to educating and developing our shared understanding on issues of inequality. So hopefully in a few months' time, you will see all of those initiatives come to fruition. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Donna. That was great. Now, I have a question that's come through on the chat, and just to let our viewers know, we will be collecting these questions, and if they haven't been answered, we'll try and get some response back out. But the question really is for both you and Barak. Barak, if you're there, And that question is, what materials or resources are available for athletes and officials who are preparing for Birmingham 2022 to be the champions of human rights in sport? This is for the athletes and the officials to champion human rights initiatives in country prior to representing that country in the games and also when they get back. So any thoughts in terms, you were talking before, Donna, about legacy, for example. Is this sort of factoring into your thinking?
Brand, it is factoring into our thinking, but because we're still at the planning phase, it's an excellent question. Our thoughts are still work in progress. But just like as we discussed at the times of COVID, we do need to work closely with chef de machines, with all the CGAs. This is an area that we feel very passionately about, and we will be working and communicating with them. But in terms of the exact format and everything else, I must say that that's still work in progress, but we'll be happy to share that with you when we're at the level of maturity where we can. Is there anything perhaps, Donna, you would like to add to that? Because I know you had conversations about this topic.
Absolutely. And I think part and parcel in answer to that question, it will be a collaboration with the athlete advocacy piece, which is led by Brendan. And no doubt the conversations that I've been involved in will involve the CGA, so that we will have those voices to share that knowledge and expertise, and that platform will be in place. And as I've mentioned, Brendan will be on later on, so I'm sure he will cover that in much more detail than I can.
Thank you both. And I think this leads us back to what Nobuyuki-san said about sharing experience. I mean, a lot of this is lost in a written document. So I think there is real value going forward for these to be linked through actual human conversation rather than just the written word. But now another question for the three of you. And that is, the questions asked is, how important is buy-in from management in ensuring respect for human rights? Now, both of you from both Tokyo and also from Birmingham have spoken about where human rights sits within the organization. And Nobuyuki-san, you stressed the need for human rights upfront, very much forward-facing. But how important is that management buy-in? It's all very well to have the policies, it's all very well to say this is what we want to do, but how are you actually measuring that commitment that you've set out? Who'd like to go first? Nobuyuki-san.
Yes, again, this is a very difficult question. Because so the Tokyo, on the basis, the very basis of the Tokyo 2020 sustainability concept, we have the 5 main themes, and one of them is human rights. So because of that, human rights is one of 5 important pillars, and in that means it's very important theoretically. But on the ground level, I can say this one anyway. So we had to consider the Japanese context or interpretations. Honestly speaking, Japan is a little bit behind if you compare with the international standard of human rights. So honestly speaking, that everybody from the very top management on the ground level staff, we well understand the human rights importance, but maybe we didn't know the more practical reality. What does it? What did it mean? So during these 8 years or almost 8 years life cycle of the Tokyo 20 Games preparation for human rights is just a learning process. And again, thanks to all the help and support from the international friends and about national domestic experts, we built up our expertise and real understanding on the human rights. This is maybe my answer. My honest answer.
Thank you very much. Barak, Donna, anyone? Barak, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think those of you who follow UK, you would be very well aware that all of these topics are very live, hot topics in terms of sports. In the UK, whether it's football or other sports, it's something in terms of the discussion, the national debate. These topics are very, very, very live. Therefore, Brent, we are a bit gifted in that sense of the fact that all our colleagues who are kind of experienced professional sports people have been kind of engaged with this conversation as a nation. So we kind of start from that kind of quite, in that sense, lucky space, because we don't need to explain a lot to people. And obviously everybody has their own opinions about these topics, but more importantly, that we have a lot of colleagues who are really passionate about giving people the opportunity, being a platform, being able to facilitate that kind of voice. From a management perspective, how does that constitute beyond, as you said, policies or pieces of paper, let's be honest, or plans, is that I genuinely believe, because I come from delivery background, I genuinely believe it only comes to life if you invest in it. So as an organization, we have actually invested in this topic. We have got a number of resources. We have tapped into a number of expertise that the organizing committee is funding, as well as we tapped into our partnerships. So for example, myself and Donna, we're secondees into the organization. So the organization acknowledged very much, as Ms. Nobuyuki-san had said upfront, to say that we are not alone on this, and therefore we need to tap into others. So if you look at our actions, I think it's the collective piece in terms of setting up the program and investing in resources and funding that actually shows you that there is buy-in from the management, and this is serious for us.
And just to add to, may I add to that, Brent?
Of course.
I mean, Bharat's pretty much covered what I would have said, but just to break that down and make it a little bit easier, absolutely. Just as ED&I is important, it's everyone's business as well. So that top-down, bottom-up approach is absolutely imperative. So for me, I think once you've got that core commitment from management, it will have that ripple effect. And that is through communication, awareness, engagement, all of that, constantly having those open and honest conversations and not brushing it under the carpet or putting it in a document and leaving it in the drawer to gather dust. It is having those open conversations and being honest with that. But if that's leader-led, then it will have that ripple effect. Thanks,
Donna. And I think it flows into another question that's been posed to you, which is around what are the major roles of the safeguarding post, given this is a new position within the Games, which is really great to see. I'm seeing this transition from Games to Canes of more of these sort of important posts coming into play. But what's the major role that role will play?
I think at the moment, he's spending a lot of time trying to educate and help people understand what safeguarding actually is, because there is a perception that it's one thing and it's absolutely not. So he's spending a huge amount of time engaging with the functional areas, how he can support them, and also working particularly through one of the functional areas with the CGAs. And as I've mentioned in my speech earlier, is that piece, that prior to that Games piece, is really important. So that that information around safeguarding will filter through to the athletes before they even arrive here for the Games. It's absolutely key that we're visible. So during the Games, I know there will only be 2 of us, but that visibility and knowledge through, whether it's the handbook that the athletes get when they arrive, they will know there'll be a point of call for the athletes and not having to worry and think, who do I go to if I have an issue? And likewise for spectators, if there's an issue that needs to be raised, they will have that point of contact. So it is a visible role. And as I've said, we're working with UNICEF, we're working with DCMS, with other expertise that we may not have internally. So it is, again, that ripple effect. Collaboration is really key here. But it is an introductory to safeguarding, but also it's understanding what safeguarding absolutely is.
Well, don't hesitate to call on the centre to see if they can help you.
Absolutely.
With any particular challenges.
It's
really
noted, Brent. It's noted.
Thank you very much indeed, Donna. Now, I'm going to go back to our friends in Austria. And Dieter, I don't want to put you on the spot, but there's been a question asked around what was presented in terms of the new guidance that you've issued. And the question is, what is the strategy that will be implemented in Austria in addressing other issues with funding grants for sporting organisations and events. Now, I'm not sure if that question is just related to the handbook, but it seems like there will also be other issues that may be environmental or of some other social concern that may come to the fore. Have you got any thoughts on that, DJ? I don't want to put you on the spot, and I know, but if you are comfortable in answering that.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Now you're on
Okay.
mute. Now we can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I got the whole question, but we have a new structure here in the ministry since a year. My unit handles with topics for sports and society. So it's not only human rights, it's about inclusion, it's about discrimination in some kinds. And especially now we have topics like sustainability and environmental topics. So we try to make sure or make clear that sport is not only sports as itself. There are a lot of topics coming to sports organizations. That's quite new for some of them because they say, okay, that's interesting, but how should we handle all these topics? And the strategy is more and more that we try to say, okay, if organizations deal with the topics, that has an implementation concerning how much money they get from the ministry. But it's not so easy because we have quite large organizations like the Football Association or skiing in Austria, but we have a lot of organizations which are quite small. So they are happy if they have someone who can work there for money. And so it's not easy for a small organization to fulfill all these expectations. So it's, I think it's step by step. We must give them information. We must give them help for doing something. So that was the idea of the handbook. So if you come to a small organization which are making a European championship in a small sport event, they have to get help to fulfill the expectations. So it's not only the classical topics in sports and human rights. It's also about how is the situation of workers there? Are they, what's the social situation, something like that. So it's quite a large range of topics they have to deal with. And I think we have to do this step by step and give them the help they need. So that could have an effect of what they are doing. But if you come too strong here and you say, okay, you must fulfill all the expectations from one moment to the next, it's not really it wouldn't be a good strategy to get an effort here.
Excellent. Thank you very much for answering that, Deidre. I think it is important that people think about the step-by-step, particularly for the smaller organizations who are not as well equipped as others. Now, I'm not sure if we have time, but one last question. I wonder if this is for everybody by the sounds of it. I wonder if they could talk a little more about how they have attempted to reduce the violations of human rights linked to these mega sports events in host cities, such as evictions and the repression of protest. For example, have they tried to develop legal routes for remedy for host city residents who have been impacted by the event? Wow, that's a big question, and I'm going to give everyone 30 seconds to basically either direct the questionnaire to some information that you can give them or any advice you've got. So who'd like to have the floor first? Silence is golden. Oh, good, Barak. Thank you.
It is a very interesting question. In terms of remedy, again, because we're at the planning phase, I can't share more than I'd like to at this point in time. Is that our strategy includes prevention, remedy, and promotion. We spoke a lot about prevention. We spoke a lot about promotion, but remedy is fundamental in terms of making those steps forward. So in terms of our planning, what we have done to share with you is that we have, again, using the expertise, we've actually written down with different FAs, the different remedy routes, and some of them do include, of course, legal, And what we find is that with 9 months to go, we're actually establishing those processes within the organization, and so that we can actually start communicating them and start establishing them. Starting early to any future team, and not forgetting remedy is fundamental, whether that's in the labor, in the supply chain, whether it's through spectators, whether through athletes. I think as an organization, it's important for you to have an established and stress-tested list of remedy processes that you kind of try in your readiness and other activities. I'm afraid I won't be able to share specifics of that yet, but it's definitely something as an organizing committee we are definitely working on.
Fantastic. Thank you, Barak. Now we're just at 12:01 New Zealand time, so we must be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That as we go forward and move into 2022, wishing Birmingham every success. And as we look to Paris with the Olympics and beyond, the same, that everyone can learn from what's been done, and we get better and better and stronger in the respect of human rights in mega sports events. So thank you very much indeed. I really do appreciate all of your contributions. Back to you, whoever it is I go back to now. I can't see anybody. Is there anybody there? I'll sign off. That's all, folks. And rest.